Just as a quick audience check, how many people here are EH&S within companies? How many are from innovation? How many are wearable technology providers, vendors? Okay. And how many of the EH&S innovation people have done pilots with wearable technology companies or are considering pilots? Okay. And last question, of those pilots, have any wearables been deployed even on a small scale? Has there been value, or are we still in an evaluation period? Okay, so no deployment yet. So this should be a really interesting conversation. We've got 4 groundbreaking experts here that are on the EH&S and R&D side of wearables. And then we've got somebody at the end who is bringing it all together, solving one of the key issues I see, which is just how do we make sense of all this data that we're getting? It's all good, but how do we make sense of it? So let's go through and have everybody introduce themselves. And what I've asked before we kick off the panel, and I'll give a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about, is for them to give an intro themselves and then talk about their favorite wearable. It could be personal, it could be something they've used on the job, and then tell us why. So Dane, why don't you kick it off?
Awesome.
I will try this out. Oops, that's right. Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Awesome. So my name is Dane Laughlin. I work for INVISTA, which is a Coke Industries company. I am an innovation engineer, so work in visual systems as well as mobile devices. My personal favorite wearable that I brought today is a smartwatch. The reason I love smartwatches is because the barrier to adoption is pretty low. People are pretty used to wearing watches, and so it's comfortable. And so it's a good gateway drug into other wearables.
All right, is this on? All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Cathy White. I work for Dow in Houston, not too far from here. So I am part of our Environmental Health and Safety Operations Technology Center. I work a lot with our innovation team at Dow to bring in technology that's going to help us achieve breakthrough performance in EH&S. And I'm wearing a couple of wearables actually, but my favorite personal wearable is the one with the pink strap that you see here. It's a heart rate monitor. And I actually have a studio that I go to that doesn't necessarily require you wear it, but encourages that you wear it when you are attending class. And basically, I go into the class, and on the screen, all of my data comes up in terms of percentage, max heart rate, and a color coding for what zone I'm in. So I appreciate that because I know how far I need to push myself, and I also know where I need to back off. And then from a professional perspective, I'm interested in how we can use a technology like this for the industrial athlete.
Okay, is this on? Hey, it is. I'm Julie Gilpin-McMinn. I work for Spirit AeroSystems in Wichita, Kansas, and I sort of bridge what you guys are doing. I'm a technical fellow for the company, which means I'm under research and development and engineering, but I work very closely with EH&S because I'm the human factors and ergonomics technical fellow. My favorite devices are like you. I like my Fitbit and my my smartwatches. But right now, what I've been looking at for the last 2 years are exoskeletons. And I've been testing 4 of them. And that's what I guess I'm here to talk about today with you. I have my preferences, but I'm not going to share which one I like the best because I don't want to in any way
Your slide's up
get me
there,
into trouble.
Julie,
Is it up there? Okay, so I've got 4 of them up there. Oh, great. I've got well, you guys saw the Levitate. That's the airframe. That's a great one that was actually out here. But we also have the Exobionics Exovest. We have the Sudex Shoulder X. That's what I've been looking at. And Kamau's Mate. And they each have a different flavor to them, and they each have some advantages and disadvantages. So I guess we're going to talk about this in a little bit.
All right, good morning, folks. My name is Steve Labudzinski. I work for Edison of New York. I focus on EH&S and wearable technologies. So my favorite wearable is the one that you're wearing that you don't know that you're wearing, okay? Because ultimately, that's the one that's going to work, all right? Everybody wants to basically, be comfortable, be in that zone. We focus a lot on sensors, ergonomic exoskeletons is one of them. Also devices that could pick up random movements, once again with sensors. Here in conservation is also very big. As far as something that we've done, and I'm gonna go above the neck a little bit as I've done last year, one of the things we've done is custom molded earplugs. And these are wearable devices, but guess what? There's no batteries, there's some technology in there where they actually put a filter in there that blocks out, say, 20 decibels of noise or 30 decibels, depending on the noise assessment that was done. But there's also a filter in there that takes out the high frequencies. Once again, no batteries. And people love it. They put it in, they forget that they're wearing it. So that's the best wearable of all right? Is the one that people want to wear, and they don't even know that they're wearing it. I do have one question for the audience. How many of you guys have phones at home phone that's plugged in? All right, so, and the reason why I asked that, I'm gonna get back to it actually towards the end of this presentation, I hope and I think. So thank you. And thanks to BrainXchane as well.
Hi, good morning. My name is Hasan. I am a senior program manager in GE Global Research. So if you have not heard about the GE Research, so it's a GE's R&D, corporate R&D center. We usually work with all the different GE businesses like aviation, healthcare, power, renewable. And we are also heavily involved with different government agencies like DARPA, DOD, and Army, Navy, and few others. So my background, I was, during the last more than 8 years, I was heavily working with GE Healthcare on developing different types of wearable devices, mainly from wireless patient monitoring perspective. Like many of you maybe went to a hospital, maybe in the ICU, that you might saw that there are a lot of cables going out from patient body to the bedside monitor. So in my program, we try to make that completely wearable and wireless so that patients are not connected using any cable. So based on my experience on that, like during the last couple of years, I was leading an internal GE program to develop a occupational safety system for worker safety application. Because as you can imagine, like GE is a big company and we have a lot of wearable needs just internal our GE. And then we work with a lot of customers like oil and gas, mining, and different utility, different other areas that are interested to use the wearable. So the program I am leading currently, is the program name is, internal name is Soteria. So the goal is to build the occupational safety system. So that system has 3 components there. So the first one is definitely the wearable sensors. We are using some of the GE internal sensor, and also we are collaborating with few partners. And then the second part is the your software like infrastructure, which will collect all the data real time. And the third and most important part is the analytics, right? By combining and fusing all the data together, how can we provide the actionable information to the like worker and the supervisor, and how can we predict a certain event before it happened? So to do that in real time, it's a very hard R&D problem that we need to do it. So that's why we are pushing for it, and we are also looking for different pilot programs and partner to grow it. So I have a small video I'd like to show you just to give you a little bit overview. That video kind of shows some of the different part I'm talking about. So if you can play the video, Brian. So the idea is that you'll be able to pick any of your sensor. It can be biometric or environmental or contextual, like camera, and then the data can be processed locally in a phone, edge server, or in a cloud. And the most important part is the analytics. So it will come with some predefined analytics, and also we can customize the analytics based on the customer needs or the different use cases. So some of the analytics are the predictive analytics. Many of our customers are asking for it, that can we predict a certain event before it happened. It is a really hard problem, but we are looking into that. And the other one is the actionable outcome. How can we fuse the data, multiple types of data together, and just provide a certain action to the supervisor or worker so that in a different hazardous or safety event, they can react very quickly. instead of going through all the data analysis. So the first part is definitely instrumenting the worker. We are looking for different types of wearable which will be comfortable to wear for the worker, and these are some of the sensors we are using. We instrumented a hard hat with a few of our voltage and gas sensors. We are using a biometric watch and an AR hard hat and an ergonomic belt to get the different ergonomic sensing data. And we are also tracking people using video and indoor RF technology, like it's just showing the geofencing alert. It's also showing the high voltage alert here, worker, but the worker still touch the high voltage line and fall for it. But the goal is that all the 6 different sensors we're talking about will combine the data together and just provide an actionable message to the supervisor to pick that guy up and take him to the hospital. And this is the dashboard we are working on, which shows the real-time hazard map and tracking and alert and other information, and also provide some historical and other some of the information. So in summary, so it has a reliable sensors. Your sensor needs to be absolutely reliable in industrial application. Connectivity is very important. Real-time location is very important. And the real-time predictive analytics, that can we predict a certain event before it happened. And also the scalable software platform. By combining all of these, like our goal is to provide actionable information to the supervisor or the worker, so that they do not need to crunch like the quantitative data from 10 different wearable sources, because the time is very important for any safety event. So that is a little bit overview of what we're working on.
Okay, well, thank you, Hasan. I think that helps bring it all together. So Verdantix, if everybody's familiar, I'm not sure if I can get back here on the slides, I might not be able to, but they have a definition of wearables in their latest report for industrial. Right up here, industrial wearables can provide real-time, two-way communications between frontline workers and EH&S managers, sharing hazard information with workers, collecting data about the risks they are facing, and helping prevent future safety incidents. But that doesn't really tell us what a wearable is. We've heard a couple of different things. So obviously, wearables can have sensors, cloud connectivity, deliver real-time safety information. But it sounds like they also can just be something that you wear that helps keep you safe, that have no sensors at all. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just our definition as a group of what a wearable is, some use cases. Then we're going to jump in and talk about user acceptance and privacy. Certainly, if users really don't want to wear something, it's probably not going to scale very well within an organization. Privacy is key. We're then going to talk a little bit about corporate ROI. So, hey, that seems to be a good fit, but what's the ROI here for the company? We're going to talk about piloting. Is it even necessary? Data management. This is what Hasan is talking about. Huge problem. There's all these different functionalities, but how do you synthesize it in a way that's easy to understand and creates value? And then the fun part is, what's the future of the factory floor? What's the future of the oil and gas field? Are we all just going to be cyborgs out there? What's going on? So let's start with young Dane here. Define a wearable. Do all wearables need to have connectivity and sensors? Which are going to be the most revolutionary?
Yeah, so I think a wearable is anything that augments the human state, right? So, I mean, Dr. Scholl's inserts to a certain degree could be considered a wearable, especially now that they're sensorizing them and giving us a bunch of information about posture and all these other things. So I think it's more about the augmentation process to how we work already. So obviously where cloud and sensorizing things make sense, we should be feeding that data to our data science teams, to analytics products, to all those different things. But kind of to your guys' point, the robotics and all these different things that don't necessarily have the sensors in them are just equally as important. Especially when we're looking at ergonomics and all those sorts of kind of data science.
I mean, speaking of worker ergonomics, that's what I'm hearing the most about at this show. I mean, these devices seem on track to outpace all other categories. I think I saw a stat, 500 million of global spend by 2039 is going to be on ergonomics. So, Julie, I know at Spirit, this is something you're very focused on. What are some of the best ergonomic tools? Why? How is this helping your workforce?
Well, I bet a lot of you have the same issue that I do, that something comes out and it's sort of the flavor of the month and your management wants you to implement it right away. Does anyone else feel that way? Yeah, me. So the latest and greatest has been the exoskeleton. And as you saw, they're passive. There's different types of exoskeletons, and I'm sure that a lot of you are very familiar with them. But the ones that I'm talking about are the passive ones that aren't, they're not battery powered, they're human driven. And I think that they are one of the best tools that I have available out there. But the problem is figuring out how we're going to implement them and where they actually fit. For Spirit, we build aircraft, and they're large. I mean, when you're working in areas where you have very large components. In newer programs, I'm able to design out a lot of the risks that are ergonomic. I can rotate a barrel to allow somebody to get into a perfect zone. But on some of the legacy programs, the ones that have been around for a long time, you're working in areas where you have, our mechanics are working with their hands overhead for the majority of their day, and a lot of times it's in a static posture. You know, they're not really moving up and down. When I have those situations, and if there's enough room, a wearable like an exoskeleton is what I think is going to be a good fit. I'd love to be able to put robotics out there and just take the risk out completely and have a cobot system. But if I can't do that, if I can put something on the person that's going to allow them to have that power to raise and keep their arms and not have to worry about that extra weight. How many of you tried on the Levitate that was out here? Did anybody try it on? It's kind of different when you first try it on, right? I mean, they're not for everybody right away. It takes a little bit of time to get used to it. So customer acceptance, my operators' acceptance of them is going to be a big issue for me. But if I'm able to put someone in one of these exoskeletons that will allow them to work for 8 hours, or in some case 12 hours, without that fatigue factor, and by mitigating the risks associated with those postures that they're in, I've got to win. And if I'm able to keep my workforce, which is aging, if I'm able to keep those seasoned people and allow them to stay at work because they aren't stressing their body, I have a win. So I'm very interested in the person side of it. I love my company. I'll do anything for it, but I want to keep those people healthy, and that's the bottom line for us. I think it is for all of us up here.
Yep. So Cathy and Steve, what are some other key EH&S challenges that wearables might solve? Are there different regions or job functions which dictate that they'll be helpful more than others?
Okay, that's like a holy grail high in the sky question, because in my role, it goes in a number of different directions. But I will say strategically at our company, we have, you could go on the Dow internet today if you want, and you can see our 2025 world leading operations goals. So we have goals specific to things like transportation safety, driver safety, injury, illness, and health. And so in my group, our tech center focuses on how can we meet those goals, because they're quite lofty, and technology is one of those pieces that fits in. And I think that's another critical point to mention. Technology is not going to solve all of our problems in environmental health and safety, and I think it's really important to recognize that. It can help, but it's not going to solve all of our problems. But we definitely can see where it can help us achieve some breakthroughs in our performance. So we have technology plans to help us hit those goals. And basically the way that we developed our plans is we looked at our data. I think all of us can appreciate data. We've been talking quite a lot about that over the course of the last few days. But we look at our leading indicators, not necessarily just incidents that have already occurred, but what could be the next event and how catastrophic could that be. A lot of us talk about severe injuries, and we have quite a focus effort at Dow on what is commonly referred to as SIF, but those significant potential life-threatening injuries as well as illnesses. So in our strategy, we're focused on risk reduction, and we have goals in the injury illness space, the health space, and these other spaces I mentioned that look at where are our high areas of risk and how can we reduce that risk. So There is exoskeleton. Yes, we're definitely looking at that, but we're also looking at other potential health events. And like I mentioned with the heart rate monitoring, thermal stress is a concern that we have. We have a lot of operations in our Gulf Coast region, a lot of people outside. Some of you have been experiencing this humidity, and if you're not used to it, hey, guess what? That's like half the year in Texas. So we have to figure out controls, and obviously there's a hierarchy that we follow trying to eliminate the hazards, but in cases where we can supplement with technology and potentially identify a man down issue proactively before they succumb to a heat stroke event, then all the better. We also have some big efforts in the fatigue space, trying to figure out ways to mitigate human error and how do we promote safe behaviors. There's a number of different technologies on the market in the fatigue space that we're looking at as well. In terms of driver safety, we're talking about things like telematics, which might get us outside the wearable space a little bit, but that concept could spill over into the fatigue arena as well, where we're trying to proactively identify safe behaviors ahead of time. So those are just a few examples of some of the areas that we've been going into in the wearable space with respect to health and safety.
And Steve, what about you? What are some of the key risks that you're addressing or thinking about at Con Ed, utility company?
So, I mean, here in conservation is one, but looking at ergonomics and wearing exoskeletons, it's really soft tissue injuries, and a lot of it has to do with the back. So we've done some studies with an exoskeleton, and I think when you go out there and you actually want to deploy or to do a pilot for an exoskeleton, look at the use case, okay? Look at that device as almost as a pair of gloves, right? Don't have people come in. As soon as you come in, please wear it, and then when you leave, about to leave, take it off. It's when you're doing a task that requires that device that benefits you, that's when you wear it. Because some of the feedback we got when we deploy this, people put it on as soon as they started the shift and then when they ended the shift. And they said, you know what, this was really uncomfortable when I was sitting at my desk or I was driving a forklift. So once again, you got to have that message that kind of relates to what the use case is. And I think of those devices kind of like a pair of gloves. Okay, if you're doing a task that requires a pair of gloves, or in this case an exoskeleton, that's when you would wear it, because that's when you're going to get the benefit. As far as looking into ergonomics, we actually did a sensor device where if you use your back versus your knees for lifting, it would actually give you some feedback. And the way we so by the way, just let me take a step back. Whenever we do a pilot, we also look for volunteers. Okay, because I think that's key. You're not going to force somebody to do this. If you're doing that, you're going to get a lot of false negatives, okay? And that's not a good start to begin with. So you definitely want volunteers. You also have to be engaged with people. Don't just, here you go, I'm going to come back in 2 months and then see what the feedback is. Continuously engagement. And depending on the complexity of the device, that's going to depend on the level of engagement. Particularly if you're collecting data, people are going to know, what are you doing with that data? Right? I also want to see the data. Where do I stand? So there's a lot of things that are out there, and as technology moves forward, the sensors are going to get better, the analytics are going to get better, they're going to get smaller, and as I mentioned previously, you're not even going to know that you're wearing a device, and that's going to be the key. Where people, like put it on, it's going to be part of their routine, just like a phone. But that's, to me, the biggest challenge is really, the engagement, and also let people know what the use case is. It's not just to come in, put it on, do it for the whole day, and then, I don't feel comfortable. So
I think you've really hit on something kind of going into our next section here, which is user acceptance, right? So, user acceptance could be, is it comfortable? It comes down to privacy. Now, a lot of these are safety technologies, right? When people start working on a workforce, is it assumed, hey, I have to wear a hard helmet, I've got to wear these gloves, or are these just going to be the next thing they've got to wear? Is it going to be corporate mandated? How important is user acceptance? What are some of the questions users are asking? How are you mitigating fears? Or is there excitement about it? Is this something they see as a positive? What are some of the examples that you've all seen across your companies as you begin to socialize these types of wearables?
So for me, we did a smartwatch implementation, and I think you guys will probably have similar reactions. First thing we did was saying, hey, we're going to do GPS tracking on smartwatches, and they go, Big Brother, right? And so what we're kind of interested in is finding the people, one, who have an interest in wearing a smartwatch, right? smartwatches have a benefit of that they actually have a market, right? People go out on their own time and they'll spend their own money to buy a smartwatch, right? And so there's a little bit of pull there because it's a consumer product that people really like. The other thing is, if you go in, I think that there's cultural leaders within an organization that don't necessarily have the roles that are, manager or anything like that in their title. And I think it's really important to be able to look at an organization and find those people, because if you can get them involved, then they'll actually influence the rest, and not punitively, right? It's not because I'm telling you and I'm your manager, it's because you respect me a lot and I think it's cool. Right? And so you gain adoption very fast that way, from those cultural leaders is what I've found.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so I think it's getting a little bit better nowadays from my perspective, because if you think about ourselves, right, we are sharing so much personal data nowadays through social media, through our phone, that people are actually getting a little bit more comfortable sharing data, especially if you can convince them, hey, this will make you safe. But what are the approach we are, one of the approach we are making in the program I talked about is that we need to give that control to the actual user himself or herself. So for example, when the user, they are doing certain work that they are not feeling safe, they want to be monitored. So we need to have some technology that they can provide the consent right away. It's kind of real-time consent. Right now, they sign a paper, right? It go through, and maybe they sign for the whole month. But we are talking maybe consent for 1 minute, right? That, hey, I am not feeling comfortable. I want to be monitored. Monitor me. Whatever sensor you have, I'm giving a consent for 1 minute to monitor me. So I think if we give the user to that kind of control, then this kind of monitoring would be a little bit more, I would say, useful.
I just have one additional comment. Yeah. So when we did the pager device, the first thing we told people is there's no microphone, there's no GPS, there's no data recorded. And the other thing, too, we also did anonymous. The only thing we asked them is make sure you have the same device every day. So it was based on location. So if it was Queens, it would be Queens, Story area, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, et cetera, depending on how many volunteers we got. And at the end, actually, people became very open, and they actually discussed, hey, you know what, that's me. And that's because we earned their trust, and they were willing to be there. And they also saw the benefit. Over time, they saw that their risky moves decreased. And at the end of some of these pilots, we saw, somewhere between 40 and 60% reduction, okay, in risky moves, because it creates awareness, there's interaction, and once again, then engagement. So you got to get the trust of the folks, and that this data is not going to be used against them. Otherwise, it's going to fail miserably.
Well, and I was going to say, it's really, you bring up some really good points. It's interesting, too, if you actually have the team develop it with you, they have some skin in the game. It makes it a lot easier for kind of mass adoption. And then if you let them see the back end, so they can go in, see their own personal data, understand all of that, it builds a core capability that they may not have had before, and kind of reinforces that adoption within your own organization, because then, at lunch, they're explaining it to their colleague, and it kind of becomes a pervasive idea. So I think getting the people who you're working with kind of involved in the back end, even though data may not, we might have an operator and data is not necessarily their core background, but if you can help them identify with that, the adoption piece of that becomes very easy.
So it sounds like getting users familiar with the use case, the data, that there's a benefit to them is really important, getting those key champions. What about looking at comfort in a different way? Are there some wearables where it's just not comfortable, like it's doing all this great stuff, but does the form factor come into it at all, or is that not as important?
This is one of my favorite subjects. The form factor is a huge deal for us. And so like I said, I work a lot with our digital operations center, our innovation group, because they're looking at wearables, I'm looking at wearables, and we oftentimes talk about avoiding the Christmas tree effect, where we could imagine somebody wearing 5 different, look, like I said, I'm wearing 2 wearables. I've had periods where I've worn 3 wearables and a shirt that measures different things. And obviously, realistically, in the workplace, can we imagine we're trying to get somebody just to wear 1, right? And we've looked at other types of wearables that require like a bio harness, going back to thermal stress and physiological monitoring, and comments like, hey, this feels like a man bra to me. And I don't want the big burly guys saying that, right? And again, these are volunteers, right? We're in periods with a lot of our technologies where we're trying to prove concepts. We call it proof of concept. It's just a step beyond bench testing, and it's a step before a formal pilot, where some of what we're looking at is just wearability and usability. We're looking at managing hygiene, right? How easy is this wearable? If it is something like a strap type of system or a harness, that needs to be probably maintained by the individual user. There might be some cleaning matters that are involved, and are they willing to do that? Are they going to do that? So there's a lot of the form factor comes into play when we're looking at this. And again, being really clear on the use case and the problem we're trying to solve, because hopefully they don't need to wear 5 different things. And I guess forecasting to the future, I think we're probably going to have more one-stop shop wearables. But right now it's like for the ergonomics posture tracking, here's this vibratory sensor. For the heart rate monitoring, here's this particular sensor. For the fatigue wearable, this one will track your sleep and give you an alertness score. And okay, for driving, here's this brainwave band that you can wear that measures your EEG activity, right? And so you start counting up, and then in addition to that, from an operations perspective, talking about things like the GPS tracking. So again, you could have a wearable for each of those things, and I think in the future, I'd love to see a boiled down form factor, and then the concept of connected PPE, like talking about GE and the work they're doing is fantastic. Can we build some of this stuff into a hard hat or into your Nomex uniform, so it's just part of what you're already putting on and not getting in your way? And even with exoskeleton, I think this technology is really going to evolve, because we do get comments, hey, this is clunky, it's hard for me to get into confined areas. What if I need to egress in the event of an emergency? I mean, these are some safety considerations that need to be taken into account. What about risk of slip, trips, and falls, right? And so I think over time, we're going to see more of augmentation within work uniforms as well, boiling that down into more of a textile sort of technology, and that's pretty cool and exciting.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend too much longer on this topic because I see the time is getting low, but Julie, I think we had mentioned when we spoke, even from a workflow perspective, right, you want to make sure that some of this equipment that you're putting on these wearables don't take too long, right? It can't be a burdensome, hey, I need 15 minutes to put this on and then I'll get right on the floor.
It's the technology itself is evolving very rapidly when it comes to these exoskeletons, and they're making them lighter and easier to put on and adjust. So that's definitely a positive. We have seen some issues with people being able to adjust it properly, and some of them are easier to adjust than others, most definitely. We work very closely with operations, the guys on the shop floor. They're the ones who are going to be wearing this. We want to make sure that they're comfortable in it. You just nailed it, Cathy, with the hygiene issue. On these, you can think about it. These are people who are out there working for a living. They're sweating, all right? They're out there, they're wearing these, and some of the components on the suits are soft components. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think Steve's going to want to wear the one that I just wore, Yeah, okay, thanks. But, because I can sweat pretty good, I can sweat pretty well. So these guys are putting these suckers on, and they're wearing them. And again, Steve nailed this one too. You don't have to wear them all the time. Take it off when you go to the bathroom. Take it off when you're going to work at your desk.
Please take it off when you go to the bathroom.
Yeah, thank God. Please take it off when you go to the bathroom. So there are those issues that are involved. So if it takes 15 minutes to get yourself adjusted in it, and then you go to the bathroom and you come back and you have to get adjusted in it again, that's not going to fly with the management out there. The positive is that the guys who are wearing them, they recognize that these are expensive pieces of equipment. These aren't, just cheap throwaways. So they're impressed that the company is willing to spend the money to put them in these. Once you get them adjusted in it and they know what they're doing, the donning and doffing process can be down to about a minute in some of them. So that's great. That's fabulous, because I want them to take it off if they don't really need it. But for most of the time, these guys are using it, and they do like it better if they can customize it a little bit themselves, make it sort of theirs.
Yeah, and actually we were gonna talk about that in a minute, but maybe we talk about it right now. Dane, when we spoke, you were saying, hey, some of these guys see this as an advantage, like they're on the front line, they're getting to try all these, different wearable technologies. But does customization matter? Like, they don't want to feel like just one in a pack of cyborgs, right? They want to feel unique.
Yeah, so kind of a funny short story about that. We did a deployment of all these smartwatches, right? People are excited, smartwatches are cool, it's a consumer product now. And I'm walking around about 2 hours after we did like the initial deployment and trained people, and this guy has a Captain America background on his watch, right? And I came up and I talked to him. I was like, "Wow, where do you get that?" That's And he's just like, "Oh, this is awesome, man." He's like, "I love Captain America," and kind of got down into his passions. And so, kind of long story short, I think it's really important to make wearable technology cool for people to adopt as well. If they're walking through, with their peers and they're getting made fun of for what they're wearing, oh, RoboCop, whatever, it inhibits adoption. So I think a big part of it is, how do you make it cool? How do you not, lock them down so that, they can only have a certain watch face or, whatever, and allow them to personalize it, because if they personalize it, they'll actually learn about it. And if they learn about it, then they'll use it and they'll kind of proliferate that knowledge. So
in this group, we've got people that are really focused on safety. You guys, this is what you do. This is your number one priority, your R&D, your safety. You want to keep the workforce safe. So when you're trying these technologies, how do you think about it in terms of ROI to corporate? Like, you've got to have a conversation with corporate and, get a budget for it. So is there a number on safety? Is safety the ROI? Is it productivity? Is it cost savings? How do you think about this in terms of, something that has value and really scaling it? How do you get the budget for some of these things? What's the ROI? Anybody? Yeah, Hasan.
Yeah, so I think if you check the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, right, you'll see that just in the US, there are 5,000 fatalities happen like every year, just in the US. And each fatality, when that thing happened, that horrible thing, just from the insurance or monetary perspective, the company spend like $3 to $7 million just for each fatality. And there are other lot of like things happening that you cannot measure by money, because people's life, you cannot put some money on it. And also the US, they're spending $6 billion per year just for the different non-fatal injuries. So it's $1 billion we are spending for this kind of thing. So if we can just, say, avoid one fatality or few injuries, that kind of justify the investment in the wearable system. So that's where, like, our company, we are focusing on it, because inside GE, we also have a lot of injuries and other stuff happening. So we are thinking from that perspective. That
Just an additional comment. So there is no price on safety, but there is a cost for safety. And anytime that you can, make some assumptions that you're reducing risk, I think at that point, that adds some value. Okay, there may not be a direct connection into money, but there's definitely some assumptions that, implementing this will reduce a risk. It's like living up in New York, and if you don't have snow tires during wintertime, what did you do? You just increase your risk of being stuck or getting into an accident. Okay, but you know that by having snow tires, you kind of improve those odds.
And I think there's a story to be told too, in maybe not like the hard values, right? So like we can put a quantitative value on it, but the qualitative matters as well. And so like, how do you create a system where you can convey to your management the soft values, the opportunity cost, the things that aren't necessarily like a hard metric that you can measure, and being able to translate that into, generally, in my personal opinion, is some of the opportunity costs that we have for doing things that we don't necessarily need to be doing. That time's actually probably worth more than the hard money savings that we have, just because we can deploy people who are, more capable into other positions. So I think there's, like I said, I think there's learning how to tell a story to management about non-hard KPIs as well.
And I just wanted to add, I think there is a way, again, that you could throw metrics or data at this. And I think that's where we've been successful at Dow. I'm not trying to totally toot our horn, but from a strategic perspective, we have worker goals around the concept of total worker health, if you're familiar with that NIOSH initiative. But we conduct risk assessments across our company from an industrial hygiene perspective. And you get a priority rating out of that. It goes from 1 to 5. So again, go to the Dow webpage. We have goals for what percentage reduction we plan to achieve in our priority 1 health risks. And a lot of those are noise related. You learn by looking at that data, but again, it's leading indicator. We don't want people to lose their hearing. That impacts quality of life and a lot of these soft dollar savings as well. It's an exposure issue, right? And we recognize that. And so we have to put in some technology, obviously, to control those noise hazards. Hearing protection is not going to be enough in those situations, right? And that's where the exoskeleton comes into play. Some of those priority 1 health risks are ergonomics, and we have those situations. We can't eliminate the hazard. We can't engineer it out. What do we do to achieve a quantitative risk reduction? So it's a numerically driven approach that we have at our company to impact risk. And I would say the third example is thermal stress. Somebody goes down, heat stroke, ambulance run. That's life-threatening. You can die from heat stroke. That's a given, right? And we want to prevent those things from happening. The business case is very obvious. We use a data-driven approach, and our leadership is very supportive as a result because they recognize the need for those efforts. It's not just a nice to do to us, it's a must do.
Julie, did you have a comment?
I agree completely. I think it's the right thing to do, and that's great, and our managers really support that, our leaders support it. However, we can also show a link to quality. When you have fatigue involved, you're going to have a decreased quality. And if we can somehow, again, mitigate those risks for fatigue, we're able to lower the number of errors we have. And when you scrap a skin, it costs a lot of money. If you're tired and you scrap it, it's going to cost a lot of money. So we're able to use those metrics also. But we do the same thing. People love numbers. Managers love numbers. If you can show them that you have a risk reduction and it's going to save them X number of dollars, that's great. But when it comes down to it, we're talking about the people's health and their quality of life.
So it's people's health, but there is a way, ideally, to quantify it to make management really understand. So we're about at the 2-minute mark. I do want to leave optimistically time for a few questions. So I'm just going to ask all the panelists quickly, just 30 seconds, 2 years from now, what is the state of industrial wearables ideally at your workplace? What's happening?
So I think I can start maybe. So I think like industrial 4.0, right? I believe that we are going into wearable.
Mic drop.
I guess that's it.
That's important. So we are going into wearable 2.0, where we think that all the wearable devices, they will be connected. Like in your home automation, right? When your smoke detector turn on, then it kind of turn on the camera to see what's going on in the house. So I think each of the wearable device, they will be talk to each other, they will be connected and provide much more valuable information than what we are not getting. So that's, I think, the future of wearable.
I agree with Hasan. We're definitely going to be connected. Things are going to be smaller. But maybe the bigger question is, what effect do the wearables have on us? Okay. I just saw a lady drop her phone. She basically panicked and started to cry. And how many of us actually pick up our phones every 5 or 10 minutes? And how many of us have phones at the house? Right. So once again, maybe the bigger question is, what effect are wearables going to have on us?
I see us as being in the implementation phase in probably 2 years. We're still early in our area, but I don't expect to make it, I don't think it's going to look like a bunch of cyborgs out there. I think there's going to be specific areas where they're targeted, and those are the areas that we're going to be using this type of technology.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with what Julie just said, but we've spent the last couple of years in a lot of ideation, concept shaping mode between ourselves and our digital operations center. And now we're starting, the rubber's meeting the road. We've kind of vetted out what's out there, and everything's not perfect, right? But we're at the point where we're applying the 80-20 rule. If we can prove the concept and we can quantify a value case and we have our businesses support, we're getting out there. So there's implementation ongoing right now. In a couple of years, I expect more widespread, but I agree it'll probably be niche applications in some instances, right? Like this exoskeleton works in this application, or yeah, we're going to do physiological monitoring for this particular job task, that sort of thing.
I was going to say, I think a theme that's going to be coming up is convergence of different platforms, right? So being able to tie everything in and understand the cohesive whole of the analytics, the data, how people like them, all these different pieces of information. So I think it's going to be a story of convergence in the next couple of years in the wearable space.
Okay, well, panelists, thank you very much. I see we're at time. Do we have time for a few questions, Brian? Or one question?
So,
Do we?
Brian Laughlin from the Boeing Company. I do a lot of AR work, and I was curious. First of all, excellent panel. I really appreciate it. Good job. It's awesome to have this expertise up here to be able to hear you guys' positions on this across industries. That's fabulous. So I'm curious, with the early advent of AR and that type of stuff, we actually had situations where some of the mechanics would actually destroy the equipment. And this goes back to Tom Caudell out in the factory on the 777 wiring looms. And it was because they were basically getting bullied in the factory. They were getting teased and poked at and stuff like that, and so they would actually sabotage the equipment. So I'm curious if you guys are seeing that, or if there's a separation between above the neck and below the neck because of the strong kind of ties we have with our face and who we are as an identity. What do you guys think about that?
So I'm not sure. I was going to repeat the question. I'm not sure I heard all of it. Did somebody hear all of it that can repeat it? I know it had to do with AR separation. I know I heard that, but I'm not sure I heard everything.
So just bringing in new technology and maybe you're standing out from the rest of the crowd. That's basically what you're saying by wearing,
So you're wearing
hard glass.
something, not everybody's wearing
Yeah,
it. How do you?
The technology acceptance level of it, and are people sabotaging, or do you see that as being an issue? I think it goes back to what Dane was saying earlier about having a champion within the shop or within the area, and I haven't seen that problem yet. And I think it is because we've used a lot of the seasoned people to do the piloting with the suits, and then we've also used, a couple of the young bucks, okay? And they're actually, although they think they're invincible, they are more likely to try it. But what I have seen is that if somebody is hurting, or we had somebody come and they said, hey, I played softball all weekend. Can I borrow one of those exosuits? And he was dead serious, and he'd used it before, and his arms were killing him, so he wanted to use it. So if you're feeling that discomfort and you feel like it is a benefit to you, I think we'll continually feel the acceptance growing on them.
And just an additional comment. So is it sabotage, or is it just, workers are not going to be very gentle with the devices, and some of these devices are very delicate. I'm done with this thing. I'm just going to slam it on my, chair or seat of the car, whatever it is. So is it that, or is it actually sabotage? So that's something you have to kind of look into. And the other thing too is, once again, you got to get the right people that want to do this, show the benefits of having these devices. You got to get that engagement and that buy-in.
Did that answer the question?
Yes, I was, again, about the sabotage thing, is there more identity, like with stuff that's more on the face and the head, and is there more kind of, if it sounds funny, cyberbullying, I guess, in this case, relative to that type of stuff for above the neck or above the neck or down? So, and then I appreciate the examples, like what, have you seen any of that type of stuff where people were getting picked at or bothered because they were trying something new?
Well, go ahead.
I think behind the scenes, people may say, hey, you're working with management, and eventually this is going to get implemented. So I could see the mentality in the background. But once again, you got to get the people, you got to get the buy-in, and you got to get their trust ultimately. And that's how these things are going to work. And once again, a lot of these devices are delicate, so it doesn't take a lot of effort to really damage them. And this is for the the vendors that are out there that manufacture these pieces of equipment. These are not, nobody's going to just, let me put this down. They've done a job, they could be sweating. The first thing they want to do is take everything off and cool down. And they're not thinking about how delicate something is.
And I can just say quickly, so we've done a variety of pilots, and we're doing something that's pretty, could be seen as controversial by workers. It's physiological monitoring, but once we've kind of walked them through the privacy, and this isn't going to be shared, we've actually had more people than we can accommodate in pilots that want to try this. I think part of it is it's a difference from their day-to-day routine. They're getting to try something that's really cool and cutting edge, and it sort of sets them apart. So this hasn't obviously been a rollout. So maybe from a rollout perspective, where it's kind of like you're mandated to wear this as part of your job, there might be a different reaction. But at least from a piloting perspective, like we always get a lot of volunteers who are really enthusiastic about it. So that may not be completely comparable, but just early stages, there's been good enthusiasm. Do we have time for other questions, or there's gentlemen? No, are we done? Okay, I'm sorry, we're done. So, but these guys are probably here available all day. Thank you.